And in other big news today, the House Republicans on the Intelligence Committee came out. We have a B1 here. Came out with their unclassified version of their investigation into the origins of COVID. I spoke actually in the Senate today with Richard Burr, who, as a ranking member of the HELP committee, that's the Health, Education, Labor, Pensions, so not in his role as on the Intelligence Committee. I asked him what the status of their HELP committee report was, because if you remember, the HELP committee's minority report formed kind of the basis of that famous Vanity Fair story that came out maybe six weeks ago or so.
That made it okay to talk about.
It's okay. You can talk about it now. It was immediately jumped on to the point where Vanity Fair sent like a whole bunch of new reporters. Vanity Fair and ProPublica sent a bunch of new reporters to kind of re-report their story, because they had been so roundly criticized. And a couple weeks ago, they published the report on their report, which found we stand by our reporting.
Well, and let's not forget that people were being pilloried as racists, right? Like that was being invoked for people who were flirting, especially in the early days, with the idea of a lab leak, that this was anti-Asian bias seeping into the public consciousness. And by the way, that was wielded to protect the interests who could be people who had things at stake in the question of whether or not it would ultimately be exposed that there's a likelihood of a lab leak. And this is from the report. Based on our investigation involving a variety of public and non-public information, we conclude there are indications that SARS-CoV-2 may have been tied to China's biological weapons research program and spilled over to the human population during a lab-related incident at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So China's biological weapons research program, again, that has long been a theory, but there were a lot of different reasons. I mean, it was created, or it was called the conspiracy theory. People invoked accusations of racism. It was they brought out all the big guns to shut down these theories early on. And so, Ryan, do you think the fact that this is kind of a partisan, it's a report from minorities, it's a minority report, do you think that tars the findings, or do you think that this is specific and substantive enough that this gives those findings credibility?
I think we'll need to wait for the classified version, which is supposed to come out. They said they're working to declassify it next year, which reminds me that I forgot to mention why I talked to Richard Burr in the Senate. I asked him what the status of their bipartisan investigation was. So the minority report already came out, but in the minority report, they said we're continuing to work with Democrats to produce a final report. He said they're very close to actually finishing that, but then there's still the process of getting it through the declassification process, because you produce an unclassified version. And he said that will probably trickle into the next Congress. So Burr is unlikely to see that published as part of his term in the Senate. But so what the Republicans in the House Intelligence Committee have done is they've already gotten their unclassified version out, but they're saying that they want to get their declassified version out, and that requires them to have control of the House,
right? And
because then they can just gavel it through, and they'll work with the intelligence community to redact things that the intelligence community says please don't include this, but how much credibility it gets will probably depend on that. On the other hand, a lot of people are just going to ignore this, and
yes.
It probably got worse with Elon Musk recently saying that Fauci funded gain-of-function research and killed millions of people. Normally, when you say that, scientists who believe that that's plausible say Anthony Fauci's agency funded gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab, and there's a lot of evidence that that research could have led to a spillover.
Right.
Whereas Musk just says he killed millions of people, and then because Musk is so increasingly hated on the left, that now I think it might be getting even harder as a progressive to talk about it. Rather, despite the ProPublica stuff, despite all the work the Intercept did with its FOIAs
yes.
and other work, that members of Congress on the Democratic side might say there's just no percentage here among my voters here, when it's like, well, What ought to matter is what the truth is.
This is a pretty good News Nation write-up of takeaways from the report. So they said the House Republicans make a few key points. One, it confirms that China does have a military research arm that operates a biological weapons program.
Right, yeah.
The report says the intelligence community, too, also knows China does research on SARS coronaviruses for its biological weapons program. So the program exists, and they do research into coronaviruses.
Right, which isn't surprising.
And it may have been happening in Wuhan.
Right, and which isn't surprising because so do we.
Not at all. Yeah, it's not surprising
at all.
the
EcoHealth Alliance, which is Peter Zasak's organization, applied for funding from DARPA, Defense Department.
Right.
So everybody, including China, calls it biodefense. Like we don't say it. None of us say it's a weapon.
Right.
We all say we're doing it for defensive purposes. It's just studying these things just in case. But it's the military that's doing the studying. So when China accuses us of doing it, they say that we're making bioweapons.
Yeah.
When we accuse China, we say they're making bioweapons, but we both say that we're just only doing it for defense. Relevant.
A familiar dynamic, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And so relevant to that, the intelligence committee report says that. And you don't have to do a whole lot of reading between the lines here, but basically what they're saying is that for every conclusion that they reached, that the intelligence community reached in a report that came out, I think in September 21, they indicated the level of confidence, high confidence, moderate confidence, low confidence, except for one. And the only thing where they didn't indicate what the confidence level was whether or not it was part of a bioweapon program. Yeah. And they said there was, quote, broad agreement. The intelligence community said there was broad agreement that this was not part of a bioweapons program. Well, clearly what the House Republicans are saying is that we have seen the intelligence report. You did not reveal what the confidence level was of that claim that you made.
Critical.
We are going to try to declassify this in the future. You did not respond to us when we pointed out this discrepancy. All of this is in here. And so we're just going to flag the fact that you didn't note what the level is. So they're basically screaming that in the classified version of the report, they found with low confidence that this was not part of a bioweapons program, but they excluded that caveat when they told the public that this was not part of a bioweapons program.
Yeah, the report is really critical of the intelligence community, which, again, if there's an indication of where the realignment does happen, it's in the flip-flop on intelligence community reports. I mean, this is very clear and very critical of the intelligence community for not communicating how they got to their conclusion with House Republicans on the committee or with the committee, period. And so it's frustrating because as more time elapses from the start of the pandemic to right now, Anthony Fauci is, at the end of the year, he's gone. He's out the door. Yeah. And I think the more time elapses here, the less accountability there is, period. The less change there is because people go back to business as usual in the labs, in the medical community, because the harsh spotlight isn't on them to the extent that it would have been if this was playing out with more urgency right away. I mean, we shouldn't have to be this far divorced from the beginning of the pandemic to be having that conversation.
Right, and it's not a conspiracy to say that a lot of this research is done in the same labs and sometimes in coordination with military funding, both whether it's United States or Chinese. In fact, so much so that gain of function for real heads is kind of being pushed aside as the main concern and is being replaced with what they call dual use research of concern, dual use meaning civilian and military.
Yeah.
So Anthony Fauci can say, well, who knows what gain of function is? So actually,
he loves to do that. We talked about that in his deposition just last week.
So dual-use research of concern is actually a kind of a broader, because we're like, look, this is concerning stuff. So you can't say, well, there was only one logarithmic expansion of the number of people that this is going to kill or how fast it's going to fly around, and so therefore it doesn't qualify as gain of function. Well, it's research of concern.
Right.
And therefore, we need strict either prohibitions or guardrails around it. So.
Right. Well, if anything, I'll say it's good timing for Dr. Fauci, who will certainly be out of government before everything is declassified. And he downplays the role he may have had in signing off on the research with American taxpayer money that could have been happening, that we know was happening and was, by most definitions, gain of function, happening in Wuhan. But he'll be out the door by the time anything is declassified in that direction that might show levels of confidence that he made a mistake, which, by the way, it's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay when you're making tons of money from taxpayers and you're not honest about it. But they can make their arguments for why the gain of function research was doing. Those arguments are wrong. We've talked about that many times. We think they're wrong. Right. But there's just no accountability or honesty about it.
And the last thing for people who haven't been following along with this, why it matters that the People's Liberation Army was involved with this lab, which was pretty much already known, is that one of the kind of key roadmaps toward kind of solving this mystery is included in the DARPA application for a grant that EcoHealth Alliance wrote up with Ralph Barrick and some others based on their work. And the Vanity Fair article talks about this. We've written about this, that it basically is a recipe for how to produce this viruses like this one. And the big defense from EcoHealth Alliance and NIH types was that, well, actually, it turns out that was never funded. The Department of Defense didn't end up funding that grant. That's true. But did the lab have its own independent source of funding, and did it use that recipe to do research anyway?
Yeah.
And it appeared, and my reporting has always shown that yes, there was funding outside. So, okay, and that's why this shouldn't be seen as kind of anti-Chinese propaganda, because this was a team effort.
Yeah.
This was the United States and China very much teaming up together to do this.
Right, and they completely sort of erased or muddied the waters on that part of the story. In the early days of the pandemic, that's actually a pretty central part of the narrative. And when I say it's okay to make mistakes, I don't mean it's okay to make mistakes that lead to the death of millions and millions and millions of people, disrupt the entire world economy. That's not what I mean, but I do mean that, dude, if you signed off on this, you signed off on it. That means your name's on it. And
even after Obama paused it.
Right, exactly. So anyway, we are paying for all of this, and we still have no idea and no access to what the truth is, and that is infuriating.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.